Hello, everybody. This is Coach Aaron Saft, the Running is Life podcast. And today, as we've kind of been wrapping up our cross country season, I thought I'd get into how we went about this season. I don't often get to talk too much about 5K, 10K training, cross country specifically. So I thought it might be interesting for um, some coaches out there, some athletes out there to get my perspective on the season because I'd like to go back and kind of look at how things went, how the kids reacted, and what I could potentially do differently for next season. Um, I coached once again at West Henderson High School, home of the Falcons. I was fortunate enough to coach my son, Keegan Saft, and their team, the boys and the girls, along with my co-coach, Abby Budzinski. Really enjoyed my season with these kids, and this will kind of give you an overview of what we did. I have on here kind of Keegan's progression, so you can kind of see where he came from to where he went. And we just finished up at the Nike NXR regional championships this past weekend. I'm recording this the day before Thanksgiving. And so, if you're listening to this on Thanksgiving Day or thereafter, I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving or had a great one. My thanks to you for being a part of this podcast. I can't express how grateful I am to be able to do this and to continue to have people that listen and enjoy and comment and share. So thank you all for being a part of this. I truly am very, very grateful for you. So, the cross country season, we can kind of get into it this way. And the way I did it, and you can see down below, I am going to post this on YouTube. So, you can watch this on YouTube, kind of get some visual as to what I'm talking about here. The podcast format may be a little bit more difficult to understand what I'm doing, but I'll try to do my best to be descriptive for those that are listening. But once again, this will also be over on my YouTube channel, Aaron Saft. I'll post a link in the show notes to that, so you can go over there and get a visual for this because I have my spreadsheet of the season. I recorded everything here in a Google spreadsheet, so you can watch the YouTube video and get a handle on what I'm talking about here and how I set up the season. I've done some non-traditional things. I've done some traditional things, but overall, I think this season went pretty darn well. I do have a few notes and takeaways of things that I might do differently next season based on how the kids responded. So. But anyway, here's an overview. So I'm on the sheet that says overview, and this was how I broke down the season. Basically created when we started, which was the second week in July. July 8th was the beginning of when we started training, and this block I have about 3 weeks here. Yeah, basically the 20 days. So yeah, about 3 weeks of time, and this is blocked out as just basic, easy aerobic miles. And this was something that I had to teach the kids of my expectations. Okay, um, I can show you the specifics. You can see there's two different training sheets. I have one that says new runners and rising ninth graders. So their mileage was a bit different than that of my upperclassmen. I wanted to make sure that, especially with new runners, that I didn't do too much with them too early. They're not as developed. And that's something we'll discuss in the workouts as well. So, things to consider there is age and maturity. And in they can be an upperclassman but be a new runner, and based on how they respond to training, they may need different training. You can't train everybody the same. We're not all the same people. We don't have the same capacities to train at levels that others do. I don't have many kids training like Keegan did. Keegan was on the upper limit of intervals and mileage, whereas some of my kids just, they couldn't handle the volume and intensity that Keegan was doing, and we based the intensity on specific times, and I'll get into that and why we did it that way. So these first 3 weeks, I just termed base training, and I made the kids understand that this should be easy running. I don't want them out of breath. I want them to be able to talk. They shouldn't be pushing. I don't care about pace on these runs. I just told them, hit your watch if you want to see how far you went or how long you went, but I don't care about the pace, and I don't want you to care about the pace on these runs. I think many high school kids run way too hard, way too often, and I think they leave a lot of that in their training runs where it could have given them more of a beneficial race day. And that's something we saw at Nike NXR, a lesson that Keegan and I both witnessed when we were there last weekend. Keegan and I ran the course with some of our girls on Friday, the day before the race, and we're listening to these kids go by, and their breath is just so heavy. They're hard breathing. It's just they were running way too intensely for the day before a big race like Nike. So Keegan and I we were jogging along. It was so conversational and easy. I think his race performance showed that we did the right thing on Friday, whereas many others maybe did not have the race that they anticipated, and that's hard, and that's the great thing about being a coach that can run with my athletes, is that I can slow them down. I can say, hey, today's not the day to push, right? And I saw other coaches running with their athletes and not saying a word, that these kids were pushing and breathing super hard and, obviously putting more exertion than they really needed to the day before a race. So I really encourage any athletes, parents, if you have athletes that are cross country runners, really teach them the value of making their easy days easy. You may want to pass this podcast along to them. I'm coaching a few young runners right now, and I'm trying to teach them that value, that your easy days need to be easy, right? Like we need those easy days. I know we see the guys that are running in the NCAA, and you've got guys like Graham that are winning NCAAs that are running his easy days at 6 minute pace. That's an anomaly, and I don't know how long or sustainable that really is. He gets injured too because he's running at such a high intensity. I'm trying to stave off injury is my big thing here. So my philosophy is to make my easy days easy. I make sure the kids understand exactly what that means. Like, what is an easy pace? How should I be feeling? What should it be like? How should I be breathing? Right? Like these easy runs, you should be able to technically nose breathe quite a bit. I'd say most of like 50% or more of the run, you should be able to nose breathe. That's how easy this pace should be. And we want to build from here to for the rest of the season. This is our foundation, right? That's why we call it the base. This is what we're going to build everything else off of. Now, this phase continues and it melds into the next phase, and each phase you'll see kind of melds and blends into the next phase. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see where the green turns to blue. We've got another approximately 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, where we're kind of introducing hill strides. Okay, so hill strides, and you can kind of see the middle column. Those are just notes. It can be races and such, but if you're watching the YouTube and you see that in the middle, those are either races or notes. We didn't do this one here, Flight of the Falcon, so I can get rid of that. um, so anyhow, the light blue phase, we introduced hill strides. Okay, now hill strides are our first introduction to speed, right? The runs are still very easy. We're still in this base building phase. I'm not trying to incorporate any type of tough running right now, not in the runs. These are just simple mileage. If I go over to my 10th and 12th graders, if we kind of coordinate let's see, the 729. So let's go over here to 729. You can see if you're watching the YouTube that we're looking at about an average run of about 5 miles. I had a medium long run in there of 7 miles, long run 7 to 8 miles, right? We're really not trying to push the distance just yet. These kids are just building. I see a lot of kids coming into the season so fit, and then they don't have a great postseason. They kind of peak mid-season because the coaches have them doing so much mileage in the summer. Some kids can work off of that, and some kids can build off of that. I again have to look at my kids and their experience, and coming from a prior season that they did so much volume during the summer and were totally fried by the state meet. I had to be really cautious about how much we did early season and how much we were building. Now my returnees for next year, I can build their mileage a little bit more, right? I think that's something I can add. There's one of the takeaways that I have from this is that, I can add a little bit more mileage to my upper class and experienced runners. Not much. I don't want to go much more than what I was doing here, but again, that's something I think I can work with and change leading into it. But you can see here, I'm going to highlight this, and if you can't see, it says 6 to 8 by 20-second uphill strides with jock down to start recovery. Okay, so very simple, very basic. Okay, I'm not working on their true speed. I'm not working on their true um, uh, maximal speed, right? Those intervals would be 10 seconds or less. Here, I'm just trying to get the legs turning over. I'm trying to build a little bit more strength and resiliency of the body. Okay, so the goal here is to increase the speed, the effort, but not in an all-out way. Okay. So again, stressing to these kids, this is not an all out sprint. Okay. I want these controlled, never straining. I want them to get a little bit faster each time. So what I tell them is start on the easier side and try to get a little further on the hill each time. So we work on that kind of negative splitting, if you will, starting out slower and getting faster as they go. And I always tell them, I don't want you to sprint the last one. I want you to feel like you could do one more. Okay. So if they get to 6 and I see they're straining, we cut it. That's it. You're done, right? Like you're going way too hard. That's not the point. I don't want you to get hurt here. So, if I see them continuing to progress up the hill and I kind of stand at the top of the hill and see where they're getting, I can say, okay, that's good, or let's cut it at 7. Okay, finish 8 and we're done. Okay. So I can witness this. So as a coach, it's important to watch these kids and see what they're doing, see how they are responding to this stimulus, right? Watch their faces, listen to their breathing. I was standing the other day, we're in winter track now, and I'm listening, and we were just doing drills, right? And these kids are just at the basic foundation. We're back at just rebuilding here. I've got now I've got sprinters and such. So I'm standing there, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm listening." And they said, "What?" And I said, "I want to hear how you're recovering." Right. So it's observing every aspect of the kids. Is the form breaking down? Right. Those are cues that you can say, oh, getting a little too tired. You don't want to be, going extremely hard in a fatigue state on bad form. That's a way to create bad habits and to get injured. So watching all of these things and actually providing feedback. Hey, stay tall, keep your head up. Let's go drive up. Let's drive those legs. Feel yourself coming off the ball of the foot. Like all of these things, trying to remind them of things and create these, good habits in their form and technique. So huge things here on hill sprints, right? Hill strides. So, we started the first week with just one set. The second week we added a second set. We kind of just build up. I even included, you can see here, I'm very cautious about this, but we did some uphill, downhill strides, some overspeed, right? To work on some of the downhills and get them used to running downhills fast, being comfortable with running downhill. Okay. So that's the stride phase. We continue to build a little bit of volume here. Again, this hill stride phase was very short because we keep strides in the program, right? So as I scroll down, you can see strides are still a part of this. We still do strides every week. Okay. So the strides don't go away. That's why but we're introducing that speed into it. So if I go back to the overview, we've gone through the green phase, which is kind of the base building, just easy aerobic miles. The light blue phase now, which is our stride phase, and that's so 3 weeks in the aerobic base building. I'd love to have a little bit more, but I add the stride phase because that's still easy aerobic miles. So I added another 2 weeks. That's 5 weeks of base building, and then we get into the fartlek and tempo phase. So the first day of school was August 12th. We started the fartlek and tempo run phase because that's still aerobic. I still want aerobic efforts. And again, I'm here describing that, when we do these efforts, it's not all out. I need you kind of at threshold, right? And we define threshold. And here's how we define threshold. We did a time trial. We did a mile time trial on the track. I timed the kids and got their times. I told them, here you can go as hard as you can for a mile. I want to see exactly what you can do. We kept this away from races. We kind of had to strategically place this because if we were racing, I didn't want the mile time trial to very much affect the way that they raced on the weekend. So we were very specific about where we placed that, and we can click over here and kind of see where I put that time trial. So here. You can see it was on 9-2, which actually came a little bit later, closer to the threshold phase, which we'll get into in a minute. But what we did with those times to continue on that thought is we said, okay, so here is what you did for your time trial. Now, your threshold pace, where I want you working, is a minute slower than that. Okay. So they did a workout in which they could, run at threshold at that pace to feel how that felt. Because when we transferred that to a cross country course, I had to say, hey, listen, we have this pace. Now you understand what the effort should feel like because it's two totally different things, right? Running on a track versus running on a cross country course with grass and hills. I said, we can't transfer the pace exactly, but you can transfer the effort. And that's what I want you to know. What does the effort feel like? How easy should this feel? Or how hard should this feel? So it took a little while for them to get used to that, but it was a way of letting them understand what my expectation was. How hard should they be going? So again, if I go back to the overview, we've got 3 weeks approximately of the fartlek and tempo phase, and so fartlek runs. We did what we call the Sisyphus hill session. If you're looking on the spreadsheet here on YouTube, that's on August 13th. Sisyphus, you can look it up. You can Google it. It's really easy to find the workout. You want to find a hill that's not extremely steep, but very long, because you'll need to be able to go up to 2 minutes, and you kind of just build the interval each set. You've got a half minute, 1 minute, 1:30, and 2 minute intervals, jog down recovery, and then repeat the set. Now, my youngers, they did 2 sets. My upperclassmen attempted 3. Now, I always tell the kids, and this is something you should stress to your kids, is that I know that there is a 3rd set involved in this. It does not mean you have to do it. Just because you're an upperclassman and more experienced does not mean that you have to do it. And what does that look like? Okay, so I'll take Keegan, for instance. So he got through the 2nd set and he's like, hey, this is tough. I'm not having the greatest workout. I said, well, why don't you just, get through the 30-second and the 1 minute in the 3rd set and we'll call it a day. Because I knew he could do the 30-second in 1 minute. There were other kids that, were set to do 3 sets and we just called it at 2. right? Like, and there was some kids that, they went all the way through. They got the third set in, but I don't force that on the kids. Just because it's on the schedule doesn't mean they have to do that. That's what has to be understood. You may have something in your mind that you're like, here's the workout, here's my intention, right? Here's what we're working on, and here's how we're going to do it. But you also have to be flexible enough to recognize that it may not be the day to push the kids into that, that big of a workout, right? So again, it's observing the kids, it's listening to how they're doing, listening to their feedback. How are you feeling? We were coming off of a race here, right? So, or excuse me, we were setting up for a race here. So I didn't want it to be too hard. I didn't want to do too much. So we were really cautious about this one. And so anyway, that's Sisyphus. We There's one I created. It's called the Saflic. Okay, it's based off of the Mohigany. And again, there's a ton of workouts that you can do that are fartleks. You can simply Google fartlek running workouts and you'll find tons of them. Saflik's just one that I created. It's a more turnover based one. We were getting their legs ready for a 2 mile race in Boone, and so I was just kind of getting this in. Now, what we did with meets is that we actually included workouts in the meets. Okay, so they would run their race and then they'd have a workout to do. Now, underclass, they would have a slightly shorter workout, if at all. Some kids didn't work out. Some kids, the race is totally enough. But, we were always there the latest, and coaches were looking at what we were doing and kind of scratching their heads. We weren't done when they got done racing. Okay, they had a good race, they had a good workout, and that's what we use these as is really workouts. I wanted them to get into the racing mentality, but know that there was more to come from the from actually after the race. So we were using those days as effectively as we can. And what we did was we would race, but then we would kind of use whatever phase we were in to incorporate a workout. So they got that second workout in for the week. So it may be it was it worked out well. Then the kids gained confidence because they had raced really hard, and then they did, and it's not an extreme workout. It's not a full workout. It's kind of like maybe half of an actual workout. But they would get something else in, and we tend to see that it would bolster confidence and fitness. We were gaining fitness from these secondary workouts without gaining too much fatigue. And so, I had to be really careful to make sure that they were getting enough rest. And that was the big thing, was, recovery, and watching their recovery and listening to them. When the next time we worked out, did they feel entirely recovered, right? If some of them didn't, we pushed the workout back a day. And I told them that. I said, if you go for your warm up and your legs are dead, try your strides. If your strides still don't feel good, maybe we save the workout for the next day. And so that was always an option. So suppose we worked out again on Tuesday, after taking Sunday off, and Monday just doing, kind of a regular run. Then we would go into Tuesday, assess, if they were fine, they did the workout. If not, we saved it to Wednesday. So there was a lot of different variation in the training and making sure that they communicated how they were feeling, and I understood and could tell were they recovered enough in order to do this workout. I wanted them to be, close to fully recovered so that they would get the most out of the workout. So that was big as well. So, we were very much in communication with how they were doing. So, we tried to still include our long runs in this phase. It being fartleks and tempos, we could still build volume because the intensity wasn't too high. So they were still increasing how much they were doing in their long runs. And you can see kind of on 819, if I go to my overview, 819 still falls into this. We were using progression runs, okay? Progression runs being, okay, so, I want, and if you're looking at the the YouTube video. Then on 8/19 for my upperclassmen, they were doing 10 miles and it was a progressive long run. They were doing 5 miles at 80%, 3 miles at 85%, and 2 miles at 90%. So again, going off efforts, it was kind of like it was pushing. I would take them out to DuPont, to Mills River, and let them do it on dirt roads so that they had like undulating hills and dirt that they could run on and kind of push. Now, the first 5 miles, um, it was, when I say 80%, it was probably easier than that. We kind of warmed up. I let them warm up and kind of get into it. So it wasn't exactly like 80% off the bat. So when you see that, I don't want you to think that they were doing like 80% off the bat. But it was a progression, right? They got a little bit faster each mile. And that's what I described to them is like start really easy, start with nose breathing. And during that first 5 miles, just kind of work up into a sustainable, effort that you could hold. If I told you, okay, I need you to do this for 12 miles, right? Like a little bit more than what the run actually was, that I wanted it that sustainable. So they built that up. And then for the next 3 miles, they kind of got into a groove. They kind of felt that like threshold groove. And then, the last 2 miles, they just kind of steadily picked it up and kind of just, finished strong. I wanted them finishing strong. So it was more of just being descriptive than actually saying, okay, here's what I'm expecting for 90%. Like, I wasn't going to give them a pace because here we are out at DuPont on hills and such. I wasn't trying them to, I didn't want them to force the pace. I wanted them to get to know the effort and how it should feel, how hard it should feel, because then they understand on race day, well, here's how hard I should be feeling, when I'm going out in a 5K. So they're learning over the course of these workouts what this effort feels like. Okay. So that was one of our progression runs or tempos, if you will. You can see we followed that with a run with some uphill sprints. So again, didn't take that out. Okay. This was a tough week. They had a progression run, then kind of an easy run with hill sprints, and then they went into what we call the halftime fartlek. Again, easy to Google this one, but the intervals are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you take half the recovery of each interval. Each interval again becomes steadily faster, teaching them to, get faster as the workout or the race progresses. We're negative splitting workouts based on the efforts. The efforts start easier and get faster and harder as the workout goes along. So I'm trying to reinforce how I want them to race. Starting strong, but not overdoing it, getting into the race and just really steadily focusing on, picking people off and getting faster as they go. Okay. So, all sorts of different fartleks in this phase. The WNC Carnival, that's the cross country carnival. I had a lot of kids miss this one because it was the SAT. But we had a tough week, and I told them going into this one, I was like, I don't want your expectations high here. This is going to be a workout because we've been working hard. We've been doing good miles. We've been doing good workouts. So, don't set yourself up to think this is going to be a PR here. And so, as tough as that is for some kids, because they expect a PR every time. I said, we're training right now. We are training. Our goal is to get to states and do the best we can at states. So, we kind of sacrifice some of the earlier races with training through them and adding workouts. Now, my workouts, they're not on here. What I would do is I would create a document for the kids, and it would have exactly what to do on race day. It had warm up times. When should you be warming up? At what time? What time is your race? Okay. Here's what I want from the warm up. I want you to do an active warm up, right? What to do during the active warm up. Then, I want you to do a jog. Here's the jog. Here's how easy. Here's how long. Then get your spikes on, get your strides in, right? Like it was, moment by moment, what they should be doing to get ready. Okay. So they didn't have to think about it. They just followed the routine. And as the season got on, they learned the routine and didn't have to refer to the document. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. And they knew what the next part of the workout is or the warm up was. They didn't have to ask. And then, of course, after the race, as I said, we would have a workout. The workout would be in the document. They just look at the document and then, complete that and then follow it up with their cool down, stretch, foam roll, and then we would get out of there. So the document had everything on it. So there is an ancillary piece to this, to this spreadsheet. So that, they did have a lot of information. And if you're interested in seeing something, an example of that, I can pass that along. Just email me, and I'll send you a link to what one of those looked like, so you can see what we did. You can also see that every day incorporated some sort of active warm up. So the column next to the date is all of these type of active warm ups. If you're interested in any of those, many of them can be found online by simply Googling what you see here. But if there's something specific that you want to ask about, by all means, let me know. The active warm up that I use for race day is actually on my YouTube channel. So you can go onto my channel and look up active warm up and you'll see that video. I also have a banded routine. But many of the others, like I said, you can find on a simple Google search. Okay. So, the day, we'd start with an active warm up, then they would get into their run, and then if they had any ancillary work, we also included strength training. If I scroll over, there is another column. So as you can see on the YouTube video, the last column was what workout we did. Okay, so there's strength workouts, there's core workouts, stretching, obviously. So there is some ancillary work that we did to accompany this to make sure that we were keeping these kids strong and healthy. Okay. Now, with that, I'll just kind of finish up that thought. Usually, a strength day would come on an already stressful day. So, if we were working out, I want to make sure that we're doing, our strength with that. Now, in an ideal scenario, I've talked about this on the podcast, you would do your run in the morning, your lift in the evening, right? We want to separate the two stressful events by a certain amount of time. Unfortunately, with high school athletics, that can be very difficult, given that, it's difficult to meet with the kids in the morning to do a workout. So we would stack ours. So they would do their workout, cool down, and then you go into the weight room and lift, stretch, and call it a day. So not ideal, but that's, unfortunately, that's the way sometimes high school athletics works. Okay. Going back. Okay. So, when I go through the document, they had a 2 mile race. Then the carnival was a 5K, and then we went to AC Reynolds and ran another 2 mile cross country race. So beginning of the season set them up pretty well with these kind of introductory shorter races aside from Jackson Park. But this fartlek tempo phase was a great. I think that was there's a few things I might add a little bit more tempo work to it next year. Again, reflecting on this one, this phase ended on 9-1. So if I go over to 9-1, you can see there are progression runs. I would say that the races themselves would be a little harder than the actual tempo that I'm looking for. So if I were to look at this and say what would I do differently next year, I would definitely add a little bit more tempo to this one. Progression runs being really truly the only tempo that we had on here. And if you look at the 8:31, and again, I'll try to be as descriptive as I can, we did a 12-mile progression run. And this incorporated, 4 miles at 70%, 4 miles at 75 to 80%, 3 miles at 80 to 85%, and 1 mile at 90%. Now that's for my upper class. If I go to the same date for my newer runners, and I scroll down to 8:31, then they had a 10-mile progression run. Now, again, we've built up to this. Now, some kids only did 8 miles, and some didn't do a progression run at all. They just did 8 miles. But what their progression run was 4 miles at 70%, 3 miles at 75 to 80%, 2 miles 80 to 85%, and 1 mile at 90%. So, there's just tweaking it based on the experience. And again, some kids did not run a progression at all. They just went for an 8 mile run because that's where they were in their training. You have to be specific to each kid. Not each kid needs to do the same thing that everyone is doing. So be adaptive, observe, know the experience of your kids and what they're looking to get out of their season. I have kids that just were, just trying to, learn to run and get fit. And so, trying to increase the effort for these kids may not have been the best idea. So think about the kid, their goals, and their experience with the sport. All right. So the next phase is the threshold phase, long interval phase. And I just clicked down here right at the beginning of the phase, right off the bat, we had the time trial. Okay. So the workout itself, you can see it if you're on the YouTube. But when you look at this, we did a warm up, they did their strides, then we had a mile time trial. When you see TT, that's time trial. So they did a mile as fast as they can. Then they got 10 minutes recovery. At first, it was just kind of resting, kind of recovering from the mile. Then they jogged a little bit to get the legs loosened up, flush the blood into the muscles. And then the younger group had a 2 by 5 minute threshold pace, and then their cool down. Okay. The older kids, if I go to the same date, they had 15 to 20 minute warm up, 4 strides, their time trial, 10 minutes recovery, and then 2 to 3 by 5 minutes at threshold pace. So, not very different. And again, we watched the kids make sure they were okay. Some kids wanted to do 4. They felt, hey, threshold's not as bad. Like, and I feel like I have the legs. I was really cautious here because, we're doing pretty much, an intense mile and then, potentially 15 minutes of work. You don't want to do too much more work than what the race is really providing. So, not with a workout like this. So I was really cautious not to let them do really more than 4. Um, it was, but some of them were really eager to do a fourth. So based on what I was watching, if I felt it was fine, then I let them do it. Now recovery for threshold is we usually did about half the interval for recovery. So with like 5 minutes, you may do somewhere between 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 2.5 minute recovery. So just depending on the kid, making sure that the effort, and again, this is where you have to be present. You have to be mindful of what they're doing. You have to listen to their breathing, listen and ask them because in threshold, they should be able to respond to you, right? And that's something I told them when you run by, tell me how you're doing because I want to hear how you're breathing. Okay. So being observant here is critical. This is a really tough effort to manage, very tough to dial in, especially when you transfer this over to a cross country course. I'd love to have heart rate straps on all of these kids, but that's just not the reality, right? Some of them had the wrist heart rate, and we could get a good gauge off of like maximum heart rate based off of the mile time trial. So some of them were using heart rate, which was cool. Others, we just, again, they learned the pace, they learned the effort, and then we transferred that over to the cross country course. So, we had that was a Monday. We had Friday night lights that Friday, right? So that's the other big reason I didn't want the efforts to be too much is because we had a huge race on Friday. But that was the start of that phase. Now, Friday night lights, I only had a few runners that did a workout post um, post race. That was a really late race. They were one of the later races, and it was kind of a mini workout, even a mini of the mini workout. And there was only a few that did it. Most of them just cooled down because that's it's a fun event, but it is very intense. It's one of the first kind of experiences that they had with actual racing. And if I go over to Keegan's, you can see where he started. So this is Keegan's mile split page for those that are on the YouTube channel. Keegan started off with Friday Night Lights with a 16:04. Not bad, kind of set us up for where we were for the season. We knew we wanted to get down into the low 15s, which if you're looking on this, you can already see his progression, which was incredible. So as the season went along, we'll kind of talk about his progression and we'll come back to this. But that was our starting point for, like a true 5K effort. because Friday Night Lights is on the state meet course. Kind of gave us a reading of where we were at, and and kind of a baseline. So, um, you can kind of like scroll down and see. We had a time trial makeup because not all the kids can make it, or they did 3 to 4 by 7 minutes, and that's my upper class, right? Still have hill strides in there. You can see mileage is still continuing to increase. Okay, so we're still building volume. Now, rest weeks, that's a big thing, right? Like, you have to kind of take into consideration, and if you kind of look at the following week, right? We had a build week here. The following week, we still had a really good workout, the 5 by 5 or 7 by 1K at threshold, but you can see the mileage is much lower. And then we had the Hare and Hounds race, which was a PR for a lot of the kids. We went from Friday Night Lights on September 6th to Hare and Hounds on September 21st. So little gap. I don't want them racing all the time and getting tired. Their big 12 plus mile run for the upperclassmen was a fundraiser run. Some of them went up to 15 miles, all on trail, all super easy. Again, knowing the expectation, right? So, but then because of all this big volume, we took a down week and let them recover. So that I think that's what really helped them at Hare and Hounds is we decreased the volume so that they felt good for Hare and Hounds. And Hare and Hounds, the temperatures were just outstanding. So when I click over to Keegan, his Hare and Hound meet was 15:35, his second best time for the season. Okay. That was an outstanding performance for him. Obviously, almost a 30-second PR. Really, really, it kind of came up big at Hare and Hounds. I was super excited for him. So I think that down week kind of helped him. We were cautious here with the 1Ks at threshold. We did this on grass on kind of a hilly loop. So, wanted to make sure we were still challenging them and making sure that they kind of gauged the effort. It wasn't, I wanted to make sure they understood when they run uphill, it shouldn't be the same pace. It should be the same effort. So I didn't want them pushing on the hills to try to maintain. I wanted them to gauge the effort to learn, okay, I got to pull back to this in order to maintain and manage this effort so I don't overdo it. So that was a really good workout for a lot of the kids. Again, we were really cautious to make sure that we weren't doing a lot of intervals. Most kids cut it at 5 or 6. That was enough for many of the kids. I did have a few that made it to 7, and even a few that did 8. So we actually went over just because of how they were feeling. And again, watching and listening, hearing their comments, like, I knew they were okay. So we got in 8 by 1K. Keegan got in 8 by 1K on that day. And we had plenty of time in between. You can notice that we did that on a Monday. They didn't race again until Saturday. So I had plenty of time for them to recover. With threshold, if they're doing it correctly, they only need about 24 hours to recover. So, we kind of let them just take a down week, and leading into Hound and Hare. Again, really proud of their performances here at the Hounds and Hare. Okay. We kind of stretched out the threshold phase. We were, I was like, again, observing and making sure we're still getting improvements. I was still seeing improvements by just doing threshold. Typically, the body only responds to about 6 weeks of a given stimulus. So if you're just doing one stimulus, we've got about 6 weeks where the body will continue to improve from it. So I stretched it to the 6 weeks of threshold. So we had about 8 workouts of threshold in this phase. So when I go over to the overview, you can kind of see the yellow is now my threshold. It actually it didn't. I would actually say that we went through this first week of October. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so we went through Wendy's Invitational with threshold workouts. So I'm actually going to change that color because we did more threshold than the calendar actually called for because that was an audible, right? Like again, you plan out your overview, but based on how training's going and what you're noticing, you can kind of see, okay, they're still responding to this. Let's see if we get one more week. And so I pushed it to the 6 weeks, and I'm really happy that we did. Unfortunately, Wendy's, that was right after Hurricane Helene, so we weren't allowed to really bring many kids. Keegan did get to go to it. He had a race unattached, but you can see Wendy's Invitational. It was a little bit hotter that day. For whatever reason, the championship race was like much later in the day instead of in the cooler temps. But he still ran 15:46, and again, that was right after Helene. That was a lot of craziness here. Obviously, we were without power and water and all that good stuff. So, not ideal going into a big race like Wendy's. And with the heat, the combination, he still got third place. And I was very happy because he had really moved up on one of the boys from another school that had been beating him pretty handedly at the beginning of the season. So there was vast improvement that I was seeing based on who he was racing against. So that was really cool to see, even though it was about 11 seconds slower than what he had run at the Hare and Hound. He was moving up on the competition, and given the circumstances of the day, still a wonderful performance. I'm really, I would say it was on par with his performance at Hare and Hound. It's the same course. They're at McAlpine in Charlotte. So, and to finish third, super happy with the result. So, I think it was just the day. Um, so going back here, the blue phase, the next phase, if you're not able to see, was kind of our what I would call our peak VO2, max VO2. Some call it anaerobic intervals. You can see there's about 2 weeks of that. So it did about 2 weeks, but then that leads into the taper, and within the taper, you continue these peak VO2 intervals. Peak VO2 being your high intensity, right? So again, we did another time trial here at the beginning of this phase to kind of see where they were at, right? So we put them back on the track, did another time trial, noted the times, and it gave them another feel for where the effort was at, right? So that's where we wanted to say, hey, what you just did, that's how it should feel on these intervals, right? So it was hard for them to kind of grasp the concept at first because these intervals were 2 to 3 minutes long, and they're like, "Am I supposed to run this pace for 3 minutes multiple times?" And I said, "No, you're supposed to run this effort, right? And like, so how does it feel? How intense does it feel? You should get that same intensity feel on these intervals." And that was a really tough concept for them to grasp because they wanted they wanted the pace, right? And the body doesn't understand pace, right? Oftentimes we get hung up on that is like, how many miles am I doing? How much, pace? What's my pace? Two variables that are really not as important to our body. Our body understands the duration of time and the heart rate at which it runs. So that's what I was trying to make them understand. So each week in my newsletter to them, I would give them, I would call it a coach's training corner. And I would talk about like these efforts, what they were trying to do, what the body understands, how it should feel, just trying to be more explaining, give them more explanation as to what we're doing and why, so that they could, understand the premise and get the goal and intention. And that's what I said. You have to understand the intention of the workout. What are we trying to do, right? And it's really important to stress the recovery aspect, not only the recovery interval aspect, how easy it should feel when you're on your recoveries and what you should, be aiming for in your recoveries, but post fact, right? What are some key things that you should be doing? You should be getting your sleep. You should be rehydrating. You should be getting, protein and carbohydrates. So we talked about all of these aspects of, what's going to make you improve. Where do you improve? How do you improve in the recovery? What should that recovery look like? So explaining all of these aspects to the kids and giving them a fuller picture, they understand more, and they get in more engaged in the program because now they're seeing the benefits of the recovery process, and they're getting fitter. So they're becoming just I would say they were buying more into the program because they see the benefits of it all. So in this kind of peak VO2 phase, the county meet ended up being at our high school. We changed that over and cut out the trails right after Helene. We were able to do that. The conference meet was moved. We did it at a local park. Keegan, if you go to his, you can see he won the county meet, he won the conference meet, and then he won the regional meet. These courses, the county meet at our high school, it was an extremely slow course. You can tell as evidenced by his time, 18:58. The Mountain 7 Conference Championship, it was him and his teammate. Keegan ran up front, unchallenged, 16:21. It was a decent time. And then the West region, I told him, just run hard enough to win this thing. I don't want you running any harder because the state championships were the following weekend. And I think that was the right call. If I go into the schedule itself, we can kind of see here. Let me get the dates real quick for you. So 10/7. So 10/7, you can kind of get an idea of what we are doing. Again, 10/7, here's our time trial right off the bat, right? Right at the beginning of the phase, kind of giving them the setup for this. Um, Here in this phase, you should want to start to reduce volume. Okay, so I started to kind of peel back the volume based on the fact that we're doing higher intensity. If you're doing higher intensity, you're creating more fatigue. So you don't want to couple that with too much volume because we don't want to create too much fatigue and injure these kids. So volume started to peel back. You can notice that I switched to time base. Okay, so we went from mileage to time base in this phase because I'm trying to control every variable of this. Again, going back to our body understands time, right? So that's why I converted to time in this phase. So I controlled that variable. I probably would have done that the first week. I should have done that the first weeks. Again, something I'll do moving forward. Once I get to this phase, we kind of switch to time base, and I explain to them why we are switching to that time base. I'm trying to control that stress variable, trying to control the amount of fatigue that they are accumulating, trying to make sure that they're recovering from these efforts, right? So you can kind of see here, the workouts. We did 4 and 2. Okay, 4 at the peak VO2 phase, or pace, and then 2 minute recovery. Um, and then 2 minutes at VO2 and 2 minute jog. So usually, typically, you do a 1-to-1 interval to recovery ratio. Here, I was challenging them with this 4 minute at peak VO2 pace and 2 minute recovery. That's tough. That is tough. And then I give them a little bit more 2 minute interval, 2 minute recovery. Depending on who they were, both the rising runners. If I scroll down to that same date, you can see here they had 3 sets of that, whereas the upperclassmen had 4 sets. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they did 3 or 4 sets. Some may have gotten through 2 and called it a day, just depending on how they were feeling. Um, and then, being more descriptive. Okay, I want easy recovery run on the next day, and then long run, easy to medium pace. I was trying to make sure they understood, so I'm giving them visual in their schedules, telling them, here's my expectation for the run. Okay. Um, you can see here on the conference meet. Okay, if you're watching the YouTube channel, once again, we had the conference meet, and then after it, the workout actually is here. Okay, so you can kind of see what they were doing post conference meet with a VO2 workout. Okay, so that's listed there. We got into the long runs. The long run was only an hour and a half, right? And then they did on the sevens. So they were doing 3 minutes at VO2 pace. Every time the watch hit 7, so once it hit 27 minutes, they would do 3 minutes at VO2 pace, then run for 7 minutes, then do 3 minutes at VO2 pace. So they got in 3 minute intervals during a long run, kind of a challenging way to do a long run, but another way that we were able to add in a second workout without creating too much stress between having 2 workouts, a medium long run and a long run. So one way to control that stress that I was talking about. So yeah, you can see the workouts here going in. As I said, we had some great results. The girls and boys were both second at regionals. Excuse me, the girls were second, the boys were third at regionals. Both teams qualified for the state meet. The week of states, we basically did a simple kind of turnover workout. You just wanted to make sure that the legs were fresh for race day, so we just did 1 minute intervals. I typically don't do a lot of 1 minute intervals in cross country just because there's not much that our body it's just not going to be long enough of an interval to give them the effect that we're looking for. So, but this, like I said, just trying to get the legs turning over and make them feel fresh for states. We had some great results at states. Keegan was second place. My other male was third. Boys took fourth at the state meet. Girls were third. So very, very pleased with their results at the state meet. Um, and it was that was a great way to kind of wrap up the season for most of the kids. Some of them have continued on and done Nike like Keegan had, and then we have Foot Locker this weekend as well. Keegan also ran a 2 mile, which is he ran the 9:21. That was the weekend before Nike. Not a bad showing for his first 2 mile on the track. He didn't know what to expect. He had never raced a 2 mile on the track, so we're again really pleased with that result. We kind of decided to do Nike almost at the last minute because we felt the competition was going to be good, and we wanted to have the time on that Wake Med Cary cross country course. And I'm glad we did. He ended up, racing extremely well, running 15:15, a 20-second PR for the season. Just really turned some heads by that performance. I think we peaked at the right time, but then we decided, hey, like that's a good place to just kind of shut it down, take a break, and let's move on. Get ready for winter and spring track. So we're turning our attention to winter and spring. Those workouts are not on here. I created separate schedules for the kids for those, and made those a little bit more individualistic. I had a wide range of abilities that were doing Nike and Foot Locker, including my daughter. So I had schedules for all sorts of kids, and just wanted to make sure that they were very individualistic based on their ability, where they were in the season, and how they were doing. So all that said, it was a wonderful season. So proud of the kids. As I look through it, some other takeaways. If I go back to the overview, the peak VO2 is my biggest question mark. It's a really hard intensity. Some of the kids respond extremely well to it, others don't, and that's where my conundrum kind of comes in, is like deciphering which kids respond well and which don't. I think perhaps based off of the performances, I'm going to have a preseason talk with each of the kids and kind of note which kids I don't think kind of did well by doing peak VO2 work, and perhaps we switch that back to fartlek and progression runs. And kind of dial the intensity back a little bit more. So, that's a conversation that I'm definitely going to have with those kids at the beginning of the season, to kind of go through that and see how they felt through that. As I said, some responded extremely well. Keegan was one of those, but there are those that don't respond to VO2. And that's the really tough deciphering, because it's really hard to know in such a short time period, how are they going to react at the state meet. For the most part, I think we did extremely well. There were a few off races. Now, was that attributed to only the fact that they were doing peak VO2 work? Not necessarily. There are other factors that can contribute to not having a peak race on at the state meet, but I think for the most part, we dialed this season in pretty well. Some small tweaks here and there, but the overarching consensus was it was a successful season. So it's great to kind of reflect upon it, and kind of walk people through it. As always, if you have questions, if you want resources, I can post this in the show notes. So if you're interested, I will post this document in the show notes so you can kind of see it. I'm happy to be a resource for people, to use it as you will. I may just post the the overview just so you get a kind of consensus of how I built the season. It's I don't want people to just copy and paste the workout schedule. You may be able to take screenshots and get some of the workouts. That's fine, but like I said, I don't want you to think like this is perfect for my team. You can use it as a skeleton outline, but again, make this individualistic to your team, their abilities, and their capabilities, right? Like we've had a very successful program at West for a number of years, thanks to Coach Galloway. And I was building off of what Galloway did and observing my athletes and making sure that I was giving them the stimulus that they needed, right? The volume that they needed, the intensity that they could handle. So do the same for your athletes. Do them that justice, right? Make sure you're training the athlete, not just the team, right? So what I mean by that is they are all individuals. Treat them as such, train them as such. Don't treat as here's the team, here's what the team workout is, here's what everyone is doing. That's not the way we should coach, right? I know it's very difficult. I know it takes extra time to think about these things and be as engaged, but if you want to do them the best by you that you can, treat them as individuals. Okay, get off my soapbox. I really appreciate you guys once again for listening, for being a part of this. Really enjoyed sharing this. Thank you. I hope you had a chance to go through the video. Once again, if there's questions, comments, concerns, just message me. I'm happy to kind of talk through things. If you want to consult about coaching, let me know. Both as a coach or as a runner. I'm going to add that to my website, coaching consults. Happy to kind of go through things with coaches. It will be a fee per session, but we can set up a Zoom call and kind of go over things and talk about things. If you have questions on training peaks or setting up seasons or workouts or programming, happy to answer questions and talk about things. So please, let me know if I can help. Always here as a resource, and like I said, just grateful for this opportunity. I hope you all are doing well. I hope your training goes well. If you need anything, if you need coaching, just let me know. I'm happy to be here for you. Thank you guys, and I look forward to next week and sharing perhaps a conversation with some other people. So until then, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.